Hi there, Joyce at Delightful Quilting and Sewing, a Nolting dealer in Avon, New York. It's been a few weeks since I did a Tech Tuesday, but the other day we were at someone's house that has a different brand of machine, and she was showing me what happened to one of her bobbins as she was winding it. And so I asked her if I could have it because it's a good visual of what can happen. This was glide thread that was being wound on a bobbin, so the same kind of bobbins that we use in our Nolting machines. And as she was winding it, all of a sudden the bobbin exploded. Here's the other side of it. So this is a good time to talk about bobbins. It's not uncommon for plastic bobbins to explode. However, the metal bobbins that we have are not as likely to explode, but nevertheless it can happen. The bobbin winder that she had was very similar to what we have for our Nolting bobbin winder. And I think it's important to note that the threads that we have today have a very high tensile strength. They're very, very strong threads. And it's very difficult to try and break that thread if you just try to break it. If you take a cotton thread, it's fairly easy to just break that thread. But some of these polyester threads are very, very strong and sturdy. So as it was winding on the bobbin, it put a lot of pressure on this, and the side of the bobbin just simply exploded off of it. Well, the same thing could happen, to any of our bobbins. There's nothing really super magical about the way that they are, the way that they're made. They're made to carry the thread, and that's about it. And occasionally they will fail. It is unusual, however, for that to happen. So today, talking about bobbin winders, I wanted to demonstrate my method for winding bobbins because I've kind of refined it over the years and it works pretty well for me. Any of the threads that we use in our machines, you should always purchase thread that is meant for machine quilting. There's a lot of thread out there in the market and some in cones. Always buy good quality, very good quality machine quilting thread, and you will never be sorry you paid a little bit extra more for that. But the threads come anywhere from cotton thread to our tri-lobe polyesters, which are the shiny threads. This is Glide. This is Magnifico from Superior. And then we also have the matte finish polyester. This is So Fine 50 weight from Superior that I'm going to wind on the bobbin. Some of these threads wind well, the bobbins wind well, and others do not. One of the issues that I've always had with glide thread trying to wind my own is not just what you see here, but one of the things that you do see here is the glide thread is very springy. And Ron, if you come closer, you'll see that the thread here kind of springs back. So even though this was wound tightly around that, one of the issues with glide thread is it has a tendency to spring back and unravel itself inside of the bobbin case. So that causes backlash and tension issues as that thread starts to pull through the machine again. So one of the things that I did a long time ago is Filtech has pre-wound bobbins. These are magniglide bobbins. They have a magnetic surface here that acts as a brake when it is inside of the bobbin case so that it kind of stops the thread from unwrapping. When I'm using glide thread, I prefer to use these, and I have another bobbin case that I didn't bring over for display here, but I've taken out the check spring in it when I use the magniglide bobbins. So that's the one purchase that I make as far as bobbins go. All the rest I fill myself. Now, even though Magnifico is a tri-lobe polyester thread just like the Glide, it does seem to wind well and does not spring back on itself and unravel itself inside the bobbin case. So let me show you the techniques that I use in winding a bobbin. So you want the thread to come off your cone and up over the shepherd's hook. You want to put your bobbin securely on the post. Make sure that it is pushed in all the way as far as it will go. And put it down on top of the start position here. Feed the thread through the hole that is at the top or above the bobbin winder tension assembly, and make sure that you pull the thread through the tension discs. Now the tension is set pretty tight on the bobbin winder. When I try to put my fingers in there, it is challenging for me to even shove my thumb in there to separate these tension discs. This tension needs to be pretty strong here to keep the tension maintained as it's wrapping back and forth on the bobbin winder. You want to make sure that it's a tight wrap here. Now this could be over tightened, and if it is, then it puts too much tension on the thread and causes it to stretch when it's wrapping. So there's kind of a fine tune there. When Nolting ships these out, they've tested these and they adjust these, so usually they do not need to be adjusted once you get them. I feed my thread out through a hole here, and I do the same whether it's an L bobbin or whether it's an M bobbin. I do not wrap it around as the instructions from Nolting actually say to do. I prefer not doing that, because if you happen to wrap it the wrong way, it can cause an issue later on. So I pass it through a hole and turn on my button, which only goes in one direction here, clockwise. And once I get it started, I put my finger just by the hole over here, and I pull off the tail of the thread that came through the bobbin. I keep my finger right there by that hole. It gives it just a little bit more security. And one of the things that I do know is this is a very important step, my finger right there. If I were winding something like a tri-lobe polyester, this shiny thread, tri-lobe polyester has a tendency to just pop right out of those tension discs right there. But keeping my finger right there by that hole is just enough to keep that thread guided right in so that it stays in those tension discs. Now, your bobbin winder is set to turn off. I turned this off before I got to that point. Make sure that your thread does not wrap up beyond the edges of your bobbin, because that will cause restriction inside of the bobbin case. Your bobbin has to be able to turn freely inside, so make sure that your thread does not up too high there. One of the things I did want to mention here, you may have noticed that on this cone right here, I have a thread knot. You can see it right here. Whenever you wind or use tri-lobe polyester threads, the shiny threads, it's important that even when you're winding them on the bobbin, putting on your bobbin winder, put a thread knot on it. When you're using it at the machine, put a thread knot on it. These threads that are shiny will puddle right down, and then when your machine starts up and it picks up the thread again, there will be inconsistencies in the tension on the thread, and it'll look like tension issues, which it really is. So a thread knot helps to alleviate all of those issues right there. The final thing that you want to do before you put that bobbin into your machine is you want to check the tension on it in the bobbin case. So this is the piggy tail bobbin that's used with the M machines. I use a Towa Gauge, and I set my tension on my threads at all the same. So this is set right about 200, which is what I run in my M machines. And when you're checking your tension with a Towa Gauge, you want to be able to grab the thread right here and pull it out firmly and just keep going and read it while you are pulling that thread out. Don't Don't try to make it read what you want it to read. I could make it read more, I could make it read less. Pull with a very firm and smooth pull and get the reading. There's a little cutter in here that you can cut that off with. And this is all set. Now, if I had needed to change the number here, now this read 200 for me. If my number was too high, I would need to reduce the tension on the spring in the bobbin case. And that's done right here, this bigger screw. Use a little screwdriver and lefty-loosey. I would turn it probably no more than 5 minutes if I'm looking at a clock. Just a tiny little bit, hardly enough to even notice, but it will make a difference. If this is not reading high enough, if I'm below 200, I'm going to put my screwdriver in and turn it to the right, maybe 5 minutes or less, and check it again until I get 200 here. Regardless of what thread I'm using in my bobbin, this is the number that I want. And it varies a little bit. It could be 175 to 225, maybe even as much as 250. Kind of depends on your machine, but that's the range for the M. If you have a L bobbin, then your range is going to be down here in the 100 to 125 range for the L's. So that's pretty much it for bobbins and bobbin winding. If you have my book, Guide to Quilting with Your Nolting, it shows you on page 16 information on winding with a bobbin, as well as some tips and things for winding bobbins, and also how to check for a damaged bobbin case, and also how to fix a damaged bobbin case. So this is available on our website, www.delightful-qs.com. Can be purchased through our website. So I hope to see you again soon. Until then, have fun quilting.